So it's officially 2023, and a new year means a new opportunity to reinvent yourself. New year, new me, right? That's exactly what everyone else is doing, so why not do the same? But to be honest, I feel like that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself, and I've never really been a fan of New Year's resolutions. I feel like if you set a resolution for anything really, and one day you don't follow through on whatever your New Year's resolution is, for example, if it's working out, then you feel terrible for the rest of the year because you completely just gave up on yourself. And I don't feel like that's healthy, honestly. That's why instead of setting New Year's resolutions, I've decided to set principles or anchor points for this specific year that I can continue to remind myself of throughout the year if I'm struggling, or if I'm kind of falling off of whatever goals I had set for the year. This will allow me to kind of stay focused and grounded throughout the year, but it won't put so much pressure on me that it will make me feel like if I don't do something someday, like if I don't eat healthy one day or if I don't work out one day, then I'm doomed for the rest of the year and I have to restart in 2024. So I hope that by setting these anchor points for myself that I'll be able to have a successful year, and I will get the benefits of the New Year's resolution, but in a much more sustainable way where I don't feel like I'm going to crash and burn. In this way, I'll feel like there's enough fuel in my tank that will help me to last throughout the year and to stay driven and motivated without burning out or reaching a point where I feel like, all right, scrap it, we're done with 2023, throw that in the trash, I'm going to move on to 2024 and let's start it over again. That's the last thing I want for myself. So let's jump into it. Here are 5 key principles or anchor points that I've set for myself this year that will help me to stay grounded throughout the year and ensure that I have the best year possible. So number 1 is being intentional with my time. This one is really, something I feel like everybody talks about over and over again on YouTube. You have to set an intentional schedule. You got to be super particular with where you spend your time, especially with all this productivity content that we constantly see online. It's really easy to kind of get bogged down into how do you optimize your day for perfect 100% productivity and eliminate every single minute of distracted time. And the thing is, of course, that's an extreme, case, and you don't want to just constantly just try to pinpoint and scrutinize every single thing that you're doing to eliminate wasted time. But I think there is some benefit to having an intentional schedule for yourself and setting that as early as you can in the day or even the night before. So for this year, I want to start every day off with a schedule or a framework for something that I've defined for myself that will at least give me a skeleton for the day. And for example, if something comes up and I have to kind of shuffle around my schedule, then I can easily move a activity or a block of time that I've set for making a YouTube video or making music and replace that with whatever urgent task I have to complete or whatever emergency I have. So just having a general schedule or an outline of the day I've found can be extremely helpful, and being intentional when setting that schedule is extremely important. And for this year in particular, I don't want to overcommit myself. That's something that I was guilty of last year. I would constantly just put so many things on my to-do list and try to jam-pack all of these different to-dos in 30-minute increments, because that would cause a lot of stress at the end of the day. And if I don't get anything done, which is more than likely to be the case, I'll just feel very disappointed in myself. So going forward, I want to add fewer things to my list, but those items should be extremely important and have more space for flexibility in case I do finish early and I have time left over. Then I can add something else in from my weekly goals list. But then again, I feel like there are benefits to completely blocking off your schedule and having a section of time that you can call catch-up time. So for example, if you have a project that you're doing that's in relation to a area like fitness or music or art or whatever, or school, and you don't necessarily finish the task that's assigned to that project, then you can use that time in that catch-up time block to complete that task. But for me, I think the important thing is to be intentional about when that open space takes place in my day. So I don't spend the whole day just waiting for the right time to do something, because everything has a place in the day. It's just that if something's left over or I don't finish something, then I can do that at that catch-up time that I've set for myself. The second principle that I've set for myself this year is focusing on creating more instead of consuming. Now this is a idea that I first heard about through Gary Vee years ago when I was first introduced to him in, I think, probably 2017. And he had mentioned this idea of documenting instead of creating, which is interesting to think about because I just mentioned that I want to focus more on creating instead of consuming, but documenting is actually a interesting way to create without having to put so much pressure on yourself to make something perfect or to make something of extremely high quality. Because you're not really trying to reinvent the wheel, you're not trying to make anything completely original. What you're trying to do is just like capture what's going on. And this is an example right here of the idea of documenting because I'm making a video about my plan for this year. So I think documenting is something that's extremely helpful, especially for myself if I want to get over that hurdle of creating something. All I have to do is just record a video of myself, discussing an idea that I find interesting. And another example of this is in music, where instead of waiting to release a song in its final state, I could share a piece of that song that I'm working on with my friends and kind of get their feedback. So that way I'm documenting the entire process. And this is something that I actually used to do with my friends. We called this group that we had put together called Snippet Squad. And on Slack, we would send snippets of what we were working on so that we could kind of give each other feedback and also keep each other accountable so that we could make sure that we were working on music every single day. Now, for me, documenting is a great way to reduce the amount of time that I'm spending on consuming content because it doesn't require that much effort. However, I do want to acknowledge that documenting is one piece of the puzzle for me. I still want to prioritize, the larger projects that I'm focusing on. So for example, finishing a YouTube video or finishing a song, that to me is still important, in going through that entire process and not just starting and stopping. Because I feel like another kind of trap that I was falling into last year was I was starting all of these projects and I wasn't finishing any of them. I would start a project and then wait a day, and then I'd wait another day, another day, and another day, and then I would finally get back to that project, add a little bit here and there, and then stop for the next 2 weeks. And then at that point, I would just feel extremely bored of what I was working on or just not inspired to finish it, and then I would start an entirely new project. So I wasn't going through that entire process of starting something and finishing something. So that's also another part of this principle that I want to continue to remind myself of, that I need to go through the entire process of something. I can't just start and stop along the way. Although documenting is important, I do want to focus on actually creating and going through that entire creative process. And this way, I'll be able to have something to look back on at the end of the year. I'll have finished projects that I can look back on and see my progress in a much more complete format. Whereas with documenting, I think it's a great way to kind of keep myself motivated and to see the progress that I've made with, individual projects, how close I am to completing a song or a video. But if I want to look at it from an entire holistic perspective, I think having part of my time spent on documenting and another portion of my time spent on finishing out these creative projects will just make me feel much more fulfilled at the end of the year. And one way to make sure that I'm doing that is to reduce the amount of time I'm watching YouTube videos and listening to music. I mean, unless it's for working out or something, but I think listening to music for the sake of passing time and procrastinating is definitely something I want to cut out. And then also just reading articles or listening to podcasts without taking any notes or without actually reflecting on what was being said. I think that's also something that I want to eliminate or reduce as much as possible. So when I am listening or consuming content, I want to be actively engaged in what's being discussed so that I can use that information and insights that I draw to improve my life and allow me to make strides in my creative pursuits. Now, the third principle that I want to talk about is prioritizing diet, exercise, and sleep. Now, these three seem pretty obvious. I don't think there's a lot that I can say about these things besides just staying consistent with them. Last year, I did not have a good sleep schedule. I was eating pretty poorly, I'd say, especially towards the end of the year, and I think that's the case for a lot of people during the holidays and stuff. It's really easy to kind of fall back on some of your habits that you're trying to build, especially when it comes to health and fitness. And I was guilty of this. I felt like I was eating a lot more sugar towards the end of the year, which is something that I was trying to cut out earlier in the year. And it's been great so far. Last week was the first week where I meal prepped this year, and I felt really good. It's done a lot to help me reduce my sugar intake and reduce my consumption of processed food, so that's something I definitely want to continue throughout the rest of this year. And fitness-wise for this year, I definitely want to stick to working out at least 3 to 4 times per week. And to ensure that I actually stay consistent with that, I think the best thing that I've found for myself is to add that workout around specific activities in my day. So for example, I call that like a transition period, like when I'm walking back from work and I'm going to my apartment. That transition period is extremely crucial. So I have to add an activity right after that transition period. Otherwise, I'll be stuck in this period called dead time. And dead time to me is a concept that I came up with that refers to the amount of time that you spend in that transition zone when you're not actually doing any activity. So that time can expand very quickly if I'm not actually aware of it. For example, if I'm walking back after work and headed to my apartment, I can end up in a state where as soon as I get to my apartment, I start scrolling on my phone and checking Instagram, Facebook, whatever, watching YouTube videos. And then all of a sudden that transition time, which was only supposed to be like 10 minutes, ends up being like 2 hours. And for me, it's important to add my workouts around those transition periods and to consciously tell myself that I'm going to work out, that as soon as I get to my apartment after work, I'm going to put on my workout clothes, I'm going to put on my workout shoes, and I'm going to head straight to the gym. And I found that this has actually worked really well for me the past week or so that I've actually started implementing this. And the key that I found is to consciously tell yourself that you are going to do X activity as soon as you reach your destination during that transition period. And finally, on the topic of sleep, I found that in order to make sure that I'm sleeping enough, it really comes down to having a consistent bedtime routine. And the bedtime routine has to take place like an hour before I go to bed. And that includes not only the time that I go to bed at, but also everything that comes before that. So taking melatonin if I need that to sleep, or winding down, like stretching, meditating. I need to be consistent with this bedtime routine and get off any sort of screen or any sort of digital media that I'm watching or consuming, like at least an hour before bed. And it's easier said than done. I haven't really gotten to a point where I feel like I've successfully been able to implement that 1 hour bedtime routine, so I may end up shortening that to 30 minutes before. But I know Andrew Huberman and a few others who talk a lot about sleep have mentioned the importance of cutting off all screens at least a couple hours before bed. And that's something I do want to try this year, so I'm going to do my best effort to make sure I do that. But one thing I know that I can control for sure is what time I go to sleep at, and this will allow me to wake up naturally the next day before work. So I haven't really decided for myself what my bedtime will be going forward, but I think it'll probably be between 9 to 11 p.m. I'm still trying to experiment to find the right kind of sweet spot for me. And once I do, I want to make sure that I stick to that throughout the rest of this year to really get into that habit of sleeping at the same time and then waking up at the same time every single day. The fourth principle that I've decided to set for myself for this year is being present with myself and others. For me, this is an extremely important one because I want to really enjoy every single moment in my day. And I think part of that enjoyment comes from just being aware of what's happening. And that means being aware of how I'm feeling, my emotions, being aware of my surroundings, being aware of the conversation that I'm part of, just be included on what's going on, and just actively listening to the other person that I'm speaking with and trying to actually understand what are they saying, trying to actually dive deep into what they're talking about and asking them follow-up questions, being curious about what they're saying. I think this really leads to really interesting and engaging conversations, and that's something that I really want more of in this year. I feel like sometimes, even on phone calls with my friends in the past year, I would get easily distracted, or I try to multitask, and I'd ask them, hey, can you repeat what you said? Or hey, you cut out for a few seconds, even though they didn't. I would just try to cover up the fact that I'm really not paying attention. But that's something that I want to not do as much of this year, or completely cut out if possible. All it really requires is just this intention at the beginning of the day that I'm going to be aware of every moment, I'm going to be present. In order to succeed with this, I think it will just require me to be extremely upfront with myself at the beginning of the day and just set that intention that, hey, I'm going to be completely present with myself, be present with others, and really focus on enjoying every moment throughout today, no matter if it's a positive experience, a negative experience, whatever the case may be. As long as I'm aware of what's going on, I'll actually enjoy the experience and we'll get something out of it. So that's something that I think can easily be achieved by setting an intention and really focus on enjoying every moment throughout today, no matter if it's a positive experience, a negative experience, whatever the case may be. I think as long as I'm aware of what's going on, I'll really end up as long as I'm aware of what's going on, I'll actually enjoy the experience and will get something out of it. So that's something that I think can easily be achieved by setting an intention. And in order to succeed and stick to this principle throughout the year, I think it will just come down to setting an intention at the beginning of the day and then reminding myself to continue to be present as I go throughout the day. And I think the best way to stick to this principle throughout the rest of this year would be to emphasize the importance of being present to myself through, setting an intention in the morning, afternoon, and then in the evening before I go to bed. So that could be just waking up in the morning and just affirming to myself that I'm going to be present, I'm going to listen, I'm going to feel, hear, see, and just be in the moment with every experience throughout today. And also maybe meditate as well, like early on in the day, so that I can actually get in that state of like observing my surroundings. I think that could also be an effective method to try out. So I'll give both of those a shot and see which one works the best. But I think at the end of the day, it's just a matter of being aware of what's going on and just constantly reminding myself of the importance of just being present. And the fifth principle that I want to focus on this year is practicing self-compassion and self-care. So these are two things that I think go hand in hand. For me, self-compassion means being nice to myself, being kind to myself, telling myself that, no matter how today went, like at the end of the day, if I'm looking back on how the day went, no matter how things turned out or if something didn't go as expected, it's fine, it's just part of the journey and I should forgive myself. I think sometimes I put a lot of pressure on myself that things need to be perfect, and if something doesn't go the right way or if I don't perform, to like the expectations that I've had set for myself, then I just feel disappointed, and I don't think that's productive, and I don't think that's even healthy at all, because I'm just constantly criticizing myself, and if I'm going to be my own worst critic, then I'm never going to actually feel like I'm making progress, and I'm never going to feel happy or fulfilled with my life, because I'm constantly poking holes at myself and what I'm doing, and I don't think that's going to help me in any way, especially when it comes to creative endeavors and anything that I'm trying to do that's requires me to take a risk. If I take a risk and I fail, like if I try to make a video about something and it just doesn't come out the way that I wanted it to, or if I make a song and it doesn't sound good, I am going to continue to place these barriers on myself if I put so much pressure on something being perfect. And if I feel like I can't take risks anymore, and if I prevent myself from taking risks, then I won't actually ever grow and reach a point where I'll start to discover something new about myself, or even get to that point where I start making stuff that actually matters or that I actually feel like resonates with me. And for me, I think that's why it's important to take risks and not to judge myself as I'm doing that. I think sometimes if I take a creative risk on a project that I'm doing, like a music focused project or making a video, I can become extremely judgmental of myself even during the process of making that. I'm like, oh, this is not worth it, or I'll start having some negative self-talk and just end up preventing myself from even finishing what I'm doing. And that goes for the other side of the coin. When I'm finished with something and looking back and I'm judging myself, oh, this is so bad, or oh, it's not good, it's cringy, it's whack, whatever. That's not productive either. And I think it's important to realize that this is all just part of a process. That's just what life is. And in anything creative, I'm going to end up in situations where something doesn't turn out as expected, and I think that's fine. And that's actually a good thing, because that means that I have ways to go, and it's all about just enjoying every single moment and every single part of that process and not fixating so much on everything being perfect. So for myself, I definitely want to be upfront with me and tell myself, you know what, just do the best you can and enjoy it. And if I actually enjoy what I'm doing, whether it's something creative related, work related, health related, I will end up smiling at the end of that experience and looking back and being proud of myself, because I actually did it. So I think the idea of just doing something is what I want to focus on, and not trying to compare it to this imagined state of what I want it to be like, or constantly comparing it to this ideal version of myself and what that person would create, because I think that's counterproductive. Obviously it's important to visualize what you want and recognize the importance of setting an intention of what you want to create, but when you're actually in the process of doing it, I think the best thing you can do for yourself is just find a way to enjoy that moment and be present with yourself. So I think that kind of goes hand in hand with my previous principle that I was talking about. And yeah, I feel like this one is something that I really want to make strides in this year and remind myself of, and realize that like there's a lot of good things happening in my life, and there's a lot of good things happening in the lives of people around me as well. And you know, even if there's something negative going on in the world, see like people struggling and suffering, I shouldn't focus too much of my attention on that, because what will happen is I'll start to feel like I should be doing more, or you know, I should be doing something about this issue in this area that I'm in. And yeah, that there are things that I can do, and you know, I recognize that, you know, there's always more that can be done. But I think it's also important to recognize that, you know, I'm just a human at the end of the day, and I have to remind myself that I only have a certain amount of hours in the day, and it's important to be intentional. And as long as I feel like I'm doing something that has like a positive impact in the world, then I should remind myself that, hey, like, you know, I am doing something good. You know, I'm not wasting my time. I'm not failing at life. I'm not, you know, being selfish because I'm not caring about every single global issue in the world. I think that can all just become just super overwhelming, and I don't want to get in that state, because when I do get into that state, I'm not productive and I can't get anything done, because I just feel that nothing is worth pursuing, because there's no point in doing anything, because I'm not going to make a dent in this world. I'm not going to, like, you know, help save the world or whatever. And this idea of like trying to save the world all the time isn't really that helpful. I think what matters more is just being honest with yourself, and being, you know, completely focused on whatever's in front of you, and not thinking too much about, you know, 10 steps from now, like 10 years from now, how will what I do now affect tomorrow, and all of that. And I think it becomes super complicated, and it takes you out of that flow state, which is the whole purpose of this channel for me, is to create a life centered around flow. And I actually have a video where I talked about why I started this channel, and you can click here, maybe if I actually can get the video to pop up. If it's not there, then you can check out my channel and just look for the last video that was posted before this one. But anyway, I'm just gonna finish this tangent real quick. I just feel like self-compassion is really important. I think in order to be compassionate about others and to be, you know, actually a caring person who looks out for others, I need to also look out for myself first. And I also need to treat myself like someone that I love. And I think there was like a video that I saw about this. I forgot the individual who made this video. It was like a TED Talk. And it was really powerful, because it made me realize, like, we sometimes like care so much about our loved ones and, you know, our friends, our family, and we want the best for them, but then we neglect ourselves. And in the process of doing that, we end up in a situation where we don't actually end up helping anyone, because we feel like we're to blame for everything, or we're blaming everyone else for everything. I think this all comes down to just not looking out for yourself, and that's something that I want to really focus on this year. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you for watching this video. This is something that I wanted to make for myself, so that I can look back at the end of the year and see, you know, if I was able to stick to these principles, these 5 principles that I've outlined, and if I was able to, you know, see any benefits in doing so in my life, and kind of compare myself to the previous version of myself. So that's really the purpose of this video. I'm also posting this to my YouTube channel, so that, like, if you are watching this and you feel like, you know, you want to have a set of anchor points or principles for the year, then this maybe will give you some ideas to consider for yourself as well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Hamza. I started this YouTube channel last year to document my journey of creating a life centered around flow, or the flow state specifically. So in this YouTube channel, I'm going to be focusing on productivity, talking about personal growth. I'm going to talk about different topics associated with my creative pursuits, so music, filmmaking, comedy, dancing, also health and fitness related topics as well. So this is just a place for me to share all of the insights that I learned along my journey, and to really contribute to a community here on YouTube where, you know, I can relay some information that I found helpful for myself, and then also react or reflect on anything else that I found to be helpful on this platform. Since I've been watching YouTube videos for so long now, specifically in like the personal growth space, and I found them to be extremely helpful for me. So I just want to contribute and kind of give back and share my story as well on this channel. So I'm hoping that you get something from it, and you also are inspired to maybe create your own YouTube channel or to document your own journey. I think it's really beneficial for anyone to do. So with that being said, I hope you have a fantastic 2023, and I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, have an amazing year, and keep diving into flow. That's gonna be my tagline. And maybe I'll change it up later, but for now, keep diving into flow. All right, peace, see ya.